welcome to the Kurisko and Company podcast. We're the Kuriskos. Today, our guest is Rachael Brown, author of For Fork's Sake. And a few weeks ago, we had a serendipitous meeting with Rachael and her husband in the Miami airport after a vegan cruise. And we started talking, and turns out she's the author of this book. And I guess it's kind of a summary of her journey and how to approach plant-based eating, compressing 10 years of experience down into 10 days to facilitate people's embarking on this. How are you today, Rachael?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Lee and Joyce.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. Tell us, how did you stumble into this plant-based thing? And tell us about your journey and how you figured out that you could compress the whole experience down to 10 days for people.
Yeah, it started now 13 years ago. My nephew, who was age 5 at the time, was diagnosed with cancer, and his mom was in nursing school, and she had a professor who said, "Have you looked at the role of nutrition in cancer?" And at the time, they had a small hobby farm. She taught me how to pull mozzarella cheese the summer before. They had a big garden, but they had chickens. We had chickens. They had, livestock that they were eating. And so this professor suggested that she start looking at the role of nutrition. So she suggested I watch Forks Over Knives. And at first she said, you should read this book, which was The China Study by T. Colin Campbell. And I read that book first. And honestly, I was mad when I finished reading it because I had never heard this information. And I'd struggled with high cholesterol my whole life. I mean, even in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with high cholesterol, and I thought I was in shape. I, had always been an athlete. And doctors would tell me, well, cut back some cheese, cut back on dairy, exercise some more. And, my numbers would dip a little, but they would always creep back up. So finding out that eating plants, getting rid of animal protein, could do so much for my body was fantastic news. So we gave it a try as a family, and we said, okay, the McDougall plan is free online. And so we went, okay, we'll do this for 10 days. So I got my blood drawn. We cut out all the animal products and oil, and I got my blood drawn. I couldn't get back in for 17 days. But when I went in to see my doctor, he said, what did you do? Because your cholesterol dropped 50 points in 17 days. And I couldn't do that with medication. So what are you doing? And that was really the beginning of our journey. And, it was both good news and bad news at the time, because we were like, yay, it worked. But also, oh no, we're going to have to do this all the time. And how do we do this? And 13 years ago, there weren't a ton of books on how to do this. A lot of people maybe had heard the term vegan, but plant-based for sure not, So yeah, a couple of years ago during COVID, when I couldn't see clients, I went back and got my plant-based nutrition certificate from T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies in Cornell. And I did their food and sustainability certificate program as well. And I just wanted to share this information with everybody I knew, and decided to write a book, hopefully to help people who are looking at it maybe, or maybe if people are already doing this, but they have family members or friends who are saying, what in the world are you doing and why? I wrote this book to help people answer those questions, like the big why for our bodies, why for the planet, and then how in the world do you do this? And I aim to make it a really simple, easily digestible, pun intended, book. So that's where it all came about.
Yeah, I just read the book, and you did a really nice job of very succinctly sort of giving compelling information about why to do this. I was very impressed by your references. I mean, you reference virtually everything, so it's pretty hard to dispute it.
Yeah.
I've been doing the plant-based thing for about six or 7 years, and Joyce has been doing it for about a year and a half now. And once you kind of get it, how important this is to your health, you just want everybody to know. And I understand your sense of anger. Like, I reread the China Study just a few weeks ago, and I mean, it's just so compelling. And as a physician myself, it's like, it's frustrating to realize that most doctors have no idea about this at all. Oh. It's just about adding more and more pills upon pills, and surgeries upon surgeries to deal with people's problems. So, I think it's really great that you've written this book, and it's going to be one of my go-to books when I'm talking to people about how to get started on this whole thing.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
That was really the goal. I mean, the audiobook is 4 hours long. It's meant to be bite-sized, like really because a lot of people, I would hand out the China study to people I knew, like, please read this book, it can save your life. But a lot of people aren't going to read a big, thick, heavy, kind of hard to read book. So yeah, this was my effort at helping.
Yeah, it is I mean, I love reading stuff like that, sciencey books like
Yeah,
that, but not everybody's
me
going to
too.
do that. But
Right.
we've all had different experiences on the plant-based journey, and I'm sure that one of the questions that you've had more times than you can count is, what about your protein?
Yes, and that is why on page 5 there's a chart about how you can get, protein. Where are good sources of plant protein? Yeah, that really recently in the last, I would say, 6 years has been a huge thing. Everybody still asks, as if we can only get protein from animals. And I think that's part of the problem with this whole thing, is that we are just so misinformed. When you think about it, I don't know if there's, in high school, do you learn about eating? Not really. Maybe you have a cooking class, maybe in a health class, you learn a little bit about macros, micros, but we don't really learn about how to eat. We learn this from our families, our communities, where we live, what's available. But I feel like we aren't really taught this stuff. So, yeah, it's surprising for a lot of people that you can get all the protein you need from plant sources. And in fact, that animal protein that you're eating is harming you, not helping you. So, this drive for more protein. I mean, people also have this idea that if they eat protein, it just becomes muscle in their body. Like, that's not actually how it works either. So, yeah, helping dispel myths for people is a big part of the job, I think, in helping them understand what plants can do for them.
Yeah, most people express a lot of reluctance or skepticism about the protein thing. But I like to give the example that the biggest, strongest animals are actually herbivorous. Elephants and giraffes and like a gorilla. Uh,
Right.
um, a silverback gorilla has been calculated to probably be able to bench press 2,500 pounds. And he's like a pure herbivore, except for a few insects here and there. So,
Right.
all of those amino acids that you get through the cow, they actually came from plants originally. So it's really a kind of a non-issue. Like, I had a conversation just a couple of days ago with somebody. She was talking about this bike ride in Minnesota where they stop every few miles and they have some kind of a bacon product. And I said, well, I enjoyed the bike ride, but I haven't eaten meat for a year, so I don't know about that bacon. So anyways, I opened the door and I told her, she was curious, and I explained the whole thing. And she said her father was a physician. And he said, well, if you were to ever go on a vegan type diet, you have to be really careful to get enough protein. And I said, well, have you ever asked your father how many cases of dietary protein deficiency he's ever seen in his career? And I would challenge that he would never have in an entire career, see a case of dietary protein deficiency. So the young guys in the gym, I mean, they're all pumped on it, and think that they need to get more and more and more. So maybe why don't you tell us a little bit about the steps involved? How do we expedite this transition?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I mean, in the beginning, we were telling everybody we knew, literally, we were those like preachers kind of, we wanted everybody to know about this. And quickly we learned if we wanted to have any friends or family that would hang out with us, we needed to tone it down a bit. So we've learned a lot over 13 years. And I would say one of the first things is really understanding yourself. So, you have to think about, how have I done things in the past? Because probably taking on a new challenge, you're going to do things the same way. So, we did the black and white thing, right? We went, okay, we're going to give everything up. We're going to try this for 10 days. I would suggest that that's the best way to go about it. Just because you notice significant changes very quickly. It's not that phasing out animal products doesn't work, because that does work for some people. And some people can't do black and white, and that's the only way they'll go about it. So that's okay. But you just just don't notice those wonderful side effects that you're having as quickly. So I really like the approach of a 10 days really giving it a go. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a sufferfest. That's another thing. I mean, I talk to people and they go, well, I don't like salads, or, I don't know what I'm going to eat because I don't like broccoli. I suggest you sit down with whoever you live with, or if you're by yourself, and you make a list of your favorite foods. Our kids were 6 and 8 when we made this transition. So we sat down and said, what do you like best? What do you like to eat? And it was like lasagna, enchiladas, pizza, tacos, all those things. So we made a list, and then we looked up whole food, plant-based, no oil versions of those things. And a few of them took a few tries to find our favorites, but soon those were our normal rotations, and I tell people all the time, like, my kids loved mac and cheese, from a box. Like, that was a treat. If a babysitter came, we didn't eat it often. And we started making cashew cheese at home, and, doing a macaroni and cheese, but with cashew cheese, and then adding broccoli or peas. And they loved it. And, then they'd go to their friend's house for a slumber party or something, and they'd be all excited to have mac and cheese. And they'd come home and go, it was gross. It didn't even taste good anymore, So your taste buds literally change about every 2 weeks. So if you can give yourself a couple weeks and allow those taste buds to change, you will be blown away by how sweet a red pepper is, or how sweet a real peach is. Once you get rid of those super sweet, super salty, super high fat foods that you're eating, your body really adapts quickly. So yeah, those are kind of the starting points for people. And then I talk about, engaging support, because it's hard to do this. And really, it's not the act of eating this way that's hard, I don't think. I think it's the continual act of swimming upstream. You're always the odd person out. There's millions, billions of dollars in advertising for food that is not even real food for us to eat, right? And so if you're the person who brings, a sweet potato and broccoli and black beans to lunch, you're looked at funny while everybody's eating dead flesh, and thinking nothing of it. So finding your people in some space, whether it's online or a community group or whatever, is really helpful. So I list some resources, different groups you can be a part of. But that's kind of some tips for getting going, I would say.
Yeah, I think, the contrast between, I mean, I'm sure very, very similar to you and your family, that contrast in how you're eating actually, in a way, is kind of an opportunity, because it draws attention to, the plant-based thing, and opens the door to provide an explanation. It was funny, I had a conversation with a physician a few days ago. I was looking at a scan on someone with a really bad fatty liver, and they were quite young. And she was sort of questioning, well, what's the role of following up with ultrasound? And I said, well, yeah, you could follow up with ultrasound or CT. I mean, but assuming if they're not alcoholic and they're not a known diabetic, and they're not doing anything to actually change it, what's the point? I said, unless you're going to intervene with this patient in some way to improve that fatty liver, like, sort of being nihilistic, like, what is the point in actually looking at it again? It's only going to get worse. And
Right.
it was kind of a door opener. She had some interest in plant-based nutrition, and was actually, I'm working at a brand new hospital. I've only been there about 3 weeks, but she's spearheading a program at that hospital to educate on plant-based nutrition. So we got invited to participate in a sort of a brainstorming session on Tuesday morning. But you slipped in something that was kind of interesting. You mentioned the no oil. Tell us about that. That seems to be a bit of a hot button issue in the plant-based world.
It is, yeah. And, there's a few things there. So I would define it as kind of Dr. Greger's definition of a processed food, because his definition of process would be something has been taken away or something's been added. And really, with even pure olive oil, a lot has been taken away, like all that fiber, all the nutrients, like you're left with 100% fat. And I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of people who are looking to add 100% fat to their diet, right? So I'm not against olives. I'm all for olives. 1 tablespoon of olive oil contains the olive oil from 50 olives. So if you want to sit down and eat some olives, go right ahead. That's great. You'll get the olive oil, but you'll also get it with all the fiber, all the phytonutrients, everything else that comes in that whole package. And what we've learned from T. Colin Campbell is your body really utilizes things different when they come in a whole package. So it's just like you don't want to drink orange juice, like eat a whole orange instead. The same kind of thing for oil, from plant-based sources, seeds, nuts, all of it, walnut, avocado, whatever it is. Enjoy the whole food rather than just the oil. The other thing, I mean, for simplistic things, I just say it's the same reason we don't pour oil down our drains or bacon grease down our drains. We all know what happens, right? Clogs the pipes. The exact same thing happens in our bodies. Literally, we clog our pipes when we eat oil. And now, there's a lot of stuff coming out about the different kinds of oils, and it basically has to do with oxidation, like how inflammation happens in our body when we have too much oil. So for us, also, I mean, I have high cholesterol. We got some genetic testing done just because my cholesterol dropped, but it didn't go as low as it should have. My son also had high cholesterol. He was 10 years old. So, based on some family history, my grandfather had Alzheimer's. He died of pancreatic cancer. My uncle died of pancreatic cancer. My dad's in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So when we took blood samples, we found out that we carried the APOE gene, 4-3. So we're not at the highest risk for Alzheimer's dementia, but we're at the next highest. So for us, trying to avoid those plaques, that plaque buildup, we just try and avoid excessive fats, and oils would fit in that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've got a fairly strong history of Alzheimer's in my family too, so it's something I'm aware of. I don't know if I've got the ApoE allele or not, but one thing that's interesting, I believe it was in Dr. Greger's book, he mentioned that Nigeria, there was a very high prevalence of that allele, and yet the prevalence of Alzheimer's is actually very low. And the reason is they're eating a plant-based diet. So, genes are not destiny. But Joyce has been embracing this way of eating and cooking for a while now. Have you had any issues? Like, what are your thoughts on cooking without oil?
Well, it's funny because I do struggle in that area. And just the other day, we moved to Iowa recently, and I go shopping because every once in a while I have a good tomato-based soup or whole pasta with a tomato sauce. And it's really hard and challenging to find product without any salt. And then I've just had so much mixed information thrown my way about olive oil. Now, when I have cooked with olive oil, I either cut it out or cut it in half. And I'm getting very particular about the type of olive oil, because I found out a lot of the commercial olive oil in the United States actually at times contains other oils like canola oil. So that's really unfortunate. But like you said, Rachel, it's interesting to see how your taste buds change. I know that mine certainly have, and they continue to do so. Early on in this journey, I remember I was at the mall and I got really hungry, and I walked into a Potbelly. Was it Potbelly?
Potbelly sandwiches, I think.
Yes. Okay. And I tried to create a vegan sandwich, and I got a bag of chips. They were so salty, I could not finish them. So it's so interesting how your taste buds change. And I'm just continuing to experiment in the kitchen. And I know that, we made the longevity soup. We absolutely loved it. Yeah. I mean, it's not that olive oil is a go-to source. I'm learning how to cook without it. But there's a couple of things I wanted to pick your brain on, because I, like you, when I first found out about this, I was just speechless. I grew up on a dairy farm, and cancer certainly runs in my family, and just the data and the research done regarding casein, dairy products in general, the inflammatory properties. Lee posted a quick short video the other day on our new YouTube channel, basically exclaiming that the link between dairy products and prostate cancer is actually stronger than the link between smoking and lung cancer. Here's my question to you. So people ask me a lot, why are you eating this way? Or I have family members that are diabetic. And so we've kind of engaged in diet and the link between diabetes and metabolic disorder. And the minute I start to share that actually healthy carbs are the cure, upwards of 90% of individuals with pre-diabetes for sure, even type 2 diabetes, and it can have a positive impact even on type 1.
Right.
Healthy carbs is the cure. They will look at me as like deer in the headlights. Like it's like the information goes in one ear and out the other, and they'll literally just start talking about how they got to cut down on their sugar and the sugar. As a matter of fact, we were speaking with a client the other 2 weeks ago, and he broached this topic of becoming whole food plant-based to combat his diabetes. And his family practice physician said, oh no, you're going to be consuming too much sugar with all that fruit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. I just spit out, but what do you say to all this? That's our challenge, is how to have these influential conversations.
Yeah, it's so hard, I would say. Like I said, I've done the gamut. I've stood on the soapbox and tried to give as much information as I can. I really try and read the room, because sometimes people are asking, and they don't really want to know. They just want to kind of, I don't know, throw something back at you that they heard on the news or something. Other times people are genuinely interested. And for those people, a few quick sound bites of what works or what's worked for you seems to be really helpful, along with a follow-up of sending them Dr. McDougall's starch solution book. I've done that a lot. But I have somebody I consult with as well. He was through his family practice doctor, through his medical operation, they were signing him up. He's type 2 diabetic. He met online with a diabetic specialist once a month, and I suggested he read the starch solution. I mean, this is exactly the same situation as you were talking about. He said, this is the opposite of what everybody is telling me, what my doctor is telling me, what my diabetes specialist is telling me, and when he told her that he was going to do this, she said the same thing, like, oh no, make sure you're not eating fruit. That's going to be the worst thing you can do. So, yeah, I mean, I think long-term where it's going to change is educating doctors, right? The medical profession, them having, more knowledge to share, more accurate scientific-based knowledge to share. But until then, I think we all just have to do our best to offer the information that we know. And, Dr. Lyle does a great talk on kind of how to, have conversation with people. And I really appreciate it. And it saved me sometimes from like going crazy or laying in bed after a conversation at a party, just going, oh, I should have said this or that, But, other times I just feel like we have the answer for people, like I couldn't live with myself if I knew somebody has a cancer diagnosis or they're pre-diabetic and I didn't share this information. So I want everybody to know. And then if they know and they still choose not to do something, all right, that's their choice. I talked with somebody last week. His father-in-law is a doctor. He's had cancer. And he's like, no, I'm not giving up cheese. I mean, I don't know how you can do that. But that's a different thing. But at least giving people the information, I feel like that's, we're called to do that, right? Like just to share the news, and we're not responsible then for what people choose to do with it. But yeah, personal examples, I think go a long way. And they're just really almost miraculous, people who get off medication in 2 weeks that they've been on forever. I consulted with somebody within, 2 weeks, she was off a $400 medication, GI medication that she'd been on for years. She's like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's, when I started this, first I read Dr. Greger's book and I was hungry for more information. So then I read Dr. McDougall's book, The Starch Solution. And I read it and I was just kind of incredulous because I'd been thinking, you got to keep your carbs down and stuff. And I was actually pre-diabetic. I was getting the odd blood sugar level over 100, odd fasting blood sugar level. So I met the criteria for being a type pre-diabetic. And I was like a little bit incredulous. I thought, well, I'm going to do what Dr. McDougall says. I'm going to eat nothing but, beans, peas, rice, corn, potatoes, lentils, and fruit. And I'm going to give it a go for a few days, just see what happens. I think I'm going to gain weight. My blood sugar is going to go up, but a few days is going to kill me. Well, I did it within 3 days. My blood sugar had completely normalized. It was at the bottom of the normal range, which is exactly where you want it from a risk point of view. And I actually lost a couple pounds in a couple days. So I stuck with it and ended up losing about 16 pounds, effortlessly, eating like a pig. And I found my exercise endurance and stamina and recovery just skyrocketed. And then I was totally hooked. So, I've been very motivated to educate people because within my own field, I mean, most doctors just have no idea. I mean, they're kind of locked in this prison, this thought prison where it's all about just giving more pills, which is just criminal. And of course, we spend almost $4 trillion a year on healthcare. 80% of that's chronic disease, and most of that's what we eat. But I've had those conversations where it's like you try to explain to people that a jelly bean and a kidney bean are completely different. Your body handles it completely differently, and just give it a try. Often they just won't do it. They're just so indoctrinated. But then I remember I had a conversation with one person a few years ago, 10-minute conversation, and next thing you know, she's like level 10 vegan, never going back. Sees the health benefits, improved endurance, lost a little bit of weight. Didn't really need to lose any weight, but it is frustrating, but I think ultimately if we can convince people, it'll be very rewarding.
Right. Well, and I think, like you said, I mean, even the weight loss piece, right? I mean, what's the diet industry is like a $220 billion industry around the world, and with a up to 57 and 97% failure rate, so people will dish out so much money for a pill or a new idea or whatever, so I mean, one of my absolute favorite things about eating this way is I love to eat. And like you said, I eat more now than I've ever eaten. I get to enjoy all kinds of food. I can have seconds or thirds or fourths if I'm still hungry. But the calorie density is so low, and helping people understand the difference, what calorie density means. You can, if you take away that 2 pieces of pizza that you were having, that's like 2 bowls of longevity soup and 4 salad bowls, or something with a sourdough roll on the side or something, So understanding that can be so rewarding. And then, like you said, many people just effortlessly lose any weight that they're carrying, and it's still eating all they want, which is such an amazing thing.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, there's so many plant foods to eat. I mean, people think that you're going to be limited. I'll say something like, "Well, I don't eat processed food, or very, very rarely, and I don't eat animal products." Well, what do you eat? Like nothing left to eat. Well, there's the lowest estimate that I've read of edible plant foods is 80,000. The highest I think is about 300,000, and so it's really quite infinite. And I found as we eat this way, you appreciate all these little subtle flavors and the nuances of the taste, and you actually enjoy your food, more than ever.
Definitely.
But I think one of the biggest hurdles here is sort of convincing people and working with people. But Joyce did the eCornell plant-based nutrition course. Now she's actually doing the life coach or lifestyle coaching.
Yeah, the wellness coaching. So no, but the eCornell course that you took is just jam-packed with statistics. That are actually quite scary and frustrating, and you're just sort of, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So yeah, we got news out. What's interesting? I know you and I recently talked about the vegan conference you were just at.
Yeah.
One of the things I really wanted you to share with our listening audience, it's funny how these little battles, we're kind of battling our own industry with all this fake meat. Could you speak to kind of what you ran?
How long do we have?
Overweight vegan people and the difference between vegetarians and vegans and so on and so forth.
Right. Yeah, it really is interesting because we got into this because of our health. And but there are many different reasons that draw people to being plant-based or vegan, right? And my kids used to point out when we first went this way, can we please get Oreos? They're vegan, and chips, they're vegan. And, just, you can eat French fries all day long. It's vegan, so there's all these things that are vegan foods that don't have animal products in them. But you know, it does seem to be a double-edged sword these days because there are so many products. So yes, I just got back from the Vegan Women's Summit in New York, and there were all these startups. You know, they're backed by millions of dollars because everybody wants to be the chicken company. Chicken is the #1 eaten meat in the US. And so there were like 4 different chicken nuggets. There were chicken wings. There were chicken sandwiches. I mean, there was sushi grade tuna. There were oysters made out of mushrooms, 3 different eggs, honey even. I mean, so there are all these products out there, but I would say that all of them were highly processed foods. And, you know, there were cheeses. There was a blue cheese. Miyoko's was there. She spoke, and she did have a couple cream cheeses that don't have added oils. But so many of these products have parts of food that were taken out, extracted, dried, mixed, you know, chemically processed, and then put back together with a bunch of added oil or coconut or whatever. And yeah, these things are not health foods, right? So you know, in the beginning, I used to say, if you have to have some, you know, if you're somebody who eats fast food burger every day for lunch, and your first step is to move from a regular burger to an Impossible or Beyond Burger or something, okay, great, that's a step. The problem is if people are just stopping there, because, you know, now dietitians who have watched, you know, this trend, they're seeing people who are vegan have the exact same health problems as people who aren't vegan. So, you know, you might be saving an animal's life, you might be saving the planet a bit, you know, with not using so much land, not creating so much CO2, but you're not helping your health out. You know, your risk of cardiovascular disease is still going to be high, risk of stroke, diabetes, all those things. So, yeah, you know, this trend is an interesting one because I'm hoping that, yeah, we have to get away from so many animal products, just planetary wise. You know, it's not going to work to keep doing what we're doing. But in the process, I'm hoping that there's enough of the plant-based movement, or enough people, you know, if they start eating these transition foods and then they still have ill health, will make a change. And back to your point about oil, Joyce, that it is true. Once you get away from eating oil and then you eat something, a product with oil, like, you can taste right away that it's something has oil in it, right? And you know, a lot of these processed foods, I can, like, halfway through the day, this is what they had for us to eat for like breakfast and lunch. I was like, I can't eat any more processed food. You know, I'm like, all I wanted was a salad or some fruit or something. But, you know, you do get used to eating, your taste change, you get used to eating differently. But I would say, eating out, you're usually going to get some oil. It's really hard to eat out at a restaurant and get no oil. You can ask for it. You can say, you know, I've reversed heart disease. I really can't have any added oil. And some people will work with you, but I've just come to accept that for the most part, when you eat out, you might be able to make a plant-based meal, but it will probably have oil. So we're really careful. At home, we have no oil, you know, and like you said, learning how to cook, you know, if you go on my website, there's a free guide you can get to learning how to saute, cook without oil, and how to bake. It's really simple. I mean, there's a learning curve there because I thought, how am I going to do stir fry without oil, you know? But you can make delicious food. But it is, you know, a lot of this food is kind of peasant food. It's not fancy fare, you know, like you said, Lee, you know, corn, potatoes, peas, lentils, starches. These are things that people have eaten for millennia, and there's a good reason we should be eating these foods. But you don't go to a fine restaurant usually and get, you know, peas and corn and potatoes. I did in New York. There was an amazing 3 Michelin star plant-based restaurant, but outside of that, I don't usually find it.
We went out to a restaurant a couple of days ago, just kind of on the spur of the moment. We hardly ever eat out. It's very infrequent. But so in this little town that we live in, there's this Chinese restaurant. So we went and had, you know, vegetables and rice, and it was tasty. I thought it was a little bit greasy, but the next day I could not get my wedding band on from all the salt. You know, I just swole off.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're hardly ever eating any salt, then your kidneys is a good thing. Your kidneys are in this state where they're trying to conserve salt, and then you dump in a bunch of salt, rather than, getting rid of it, it's actually trying to conserve it. So it takes a day or two to flush that all out. But
Yes.
so that I mean, one of the things, with vegans trying to promote their cause and yet eating unhealthy foods and being overweight themselves, they're actually not doing their cause a service.
Right.
Dr. McDougall talks about the fat vegan, how they're not going to recruit people by being fat. It behooves them to really try to eat a healthy vegan diet. I actually tend to not use that word vegan very often. I, usually focus on whole food plant-based because it explains what all vegan says is you don't eat animal products. It doesn't say what you actually do eat.
Right. Yeah, people are really sensitive as to what term they use. I mean, I did a podcast with Chef AJ, and she's like, "Oh, I use vegan," and I'm with you. I use the whole food, plant-based, no oil, because the description is right there. A lot of people will kind of go, "Well, what is that?" Like, back to your point, like, what do you actually eat? I'm like, well, there are a lot of plants you can eat. For simplifying, I say we don't eat anything with a mother or a face. I mean, that kind of clears it up too. But yeah, the terms are interesting because different people have different associations with each of the terms.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us about more of the steps involved to landing at the other end of the 10 days, being whole food plant-based? Tell us some more about some of the other steps.
Yeah. Gosh, I think that I think primarily cooking at home, figuring out what your favorites are. And you don't need to be cooking, an elaborate meal 7 days a week. I think if you find a couple, like you have your list of your favorite foods, let's say find if you love burger and fries, great. Find a few different burgers, a black bean burger, a quinoa burger, a beet burger, whatever. Try a few different burgers. Learn how to make fries in the oven or in an air fryer and put that in your meal rotation. But I think keeping it simple is really key to starting out. Dr. McDougall references this a lot too, just in limiting kind of the variety of your taste in the beginning can be helpful. So, we'll do tostadas, rice and beans with corn tortillas and, cabbage, jalapeno, radishes, whatever you like, green pepper, corn. We'll sometimes have that 3 times a week because we like it. It's simple. It's easy, and then sometimes we'll make elaborate dinners and we love mixing in new fruits and vegetables. I tell people, grab something new that you've never tried, find a vegetable or a fruit each week that you've never tried, or you hate it as a kid, but give it a try now, maybe 5 different ways and see if your tastes have changed. But yeah, keeping it simple, I think, is a big one. Eating at home, like you reference, maybe avoiding the restaurants if you can for a short period of time. There's, like you said, you can find plant-based food at almost any restaurant. I mean, I've been nowhere that I couldn't eat a meal. Now, it might have been a meal made up of all sides, like a side of broccoli or whatever greens they had with a potato or something. But, especially ethnic restaurants, you can always find a meal. So I talk about, when you do go out or when you have a work meeting or a business meeting at a restaurant, there's ways to go about planning ahead. You can bring your card that says, can you give this to the chef, that says I'm fighting cardiovascular disease or I've got diabetes and these are the things that I can't have. So yeah, keeping it simple that way. And then I talk about how to talk to people you're around, kind of like we've discussed, but especially if you've got kids and maybe your parents are worried, or teachers. My kids' teachers would, send a note home and go, there's not enough protein in their lunch. And I'd have the opportunity to say, well, actually, there's a lot of protein in that, it's just not animal protein. So yeah, taking those opportunities to educate people wherever you can is certainly helpful.
Well, Joyce, why don't you tell her about your experiences when you first started this whole thing? You kept it really simple.
I did.
And got quick results.
I did. I mean, I lost, I don't know, around 9 pounds, like no portion control. I mean, I would go to bed every night with a food baby. Yeah. Because he told me I could eat as many potatoes as I wanted to.
Yes.
I have a favorite bean recipe with dark red kidney beans, and it has like an orange juice based dressing to it and you throw it in the fridge. I lived on that. I bought a jar of sauerkraut, pickled beets and potatoes. And I mean, I kept it very simple and my taste did change. And like you said, you see the results so quickly, you feel so clean, clear-headed, fresh, that you don't want to change. And then you get curious and you start to cook and experiment. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you, I've never used so much cumin in my entire life. And I absolutely have fallen in love with leeks. I've never cooked with a leek ever. Did you have the same experience? Like, what are some of your favorite vegetables or fruits that you had never tried and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing?
Right. Yes, I would say I have an amazing cauliflower leek soup I'll have to give you, because once leeks come and they're at our farmer's market, we have it like once a week at least, you know? So yeah, it's like literally roasted cauliflower, garlic, and sliced leeks. And then you put in the Vitamix, you have some cashews. It's this amazing, creamy, delicious soup. So good. Yeah. Yeah, you know, spices and herbs, those are some of the best things for us, right? And once you get rid of all that super sweet, super salty, super fatty flavors that you're used to, you can start experimenting with different herbs and spices and you really taste them, right? Which, like you're describing, is just magical on food. Yeah, you know, we're in like the salad bowl of California. We're Santa Cruz area. So we have fresh artichokes all the time. And, you know, growing up, I thought the only way to eat artichoke was to dip the leaves in butter and eat them. But turns out not true. You know, we love artichokes in many different ways. Same thing with Brussels sprouts. I had never had, I would say, Brussels sprouts cooked well until I lived here. And Brussels sprouts are one of our favorite foods now. We literally cut them in half, put them in a pan, drizzle some hoisin sauce and some tamari on there, and you cook it down and it like starts to caramelize. And we will eat those just plain. We'll eat those as a side. We'll put them on bowls. I mean, we'll eat them cold in the morning. I mean, we all love those.
She'll eat Brussels sprouts for breakfast.
Yeah.
Brussels sprouts.
And they're so good. Yeah, cruciferous vegetable. I mean, they're so good for you, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's been fun experimenting with different things, you know, pineapple, guava. Those are some things that, you know, I hadn't had until living here, because we didn't have those in grocery stores in Washington State or Alaska or Hawaii, where I've lived previously. So, yeah, you know, if you can, finding local produce, things that are grown near you, that are wonderful, they're fresh and all that, but also to Jeff Novick's point, he's the one of the longevity soup recipe. You know, you don't have to have a Whole Foods, and this is a big myth, another myth, but like right up there with protein, that you have to have a lot of money or live near a Whole Foods to eat this way. And that's just absolutely not true. You don't need a specialty market. You know, even you can go to a dollar store and get a bag of beans. There's always beans or lentils. They have a grain, you know, rice. You have some canned vegetables or frozen vegetables, which there's no poo-pooing on frozen vegetables. I mean, you use those as much as you want, because those are picked flash frozen. You know, they might be fresher than the spinach that you're picking up that's been sitting in your store for a week or two, right? So it doesn't have to be cost prohibitive, you know, but if you can, support the farmers around you and try some new things. But yeah, you know, I suggest that if people can, they eat organic, but again, you don't have to, you know, talking about Dr. Greger's research. Yeah, if you're going to avoid an apple because it's not organic, but then you'll eat a bag of chips, like there's, you know, that doesn't work, right? So don't avoid a fruit or vegetable just because you can't have the organic version, but wash it well. You know, there's that Dirty Dozen list and Clean 15 you can check every year, you know. So things, I mean, we typically don't buy avocados or bananas that are organic. Sometimes I do, because I want to promote organic things being farmed, but you don't have to, because, you know, those things have appeal. And yeah, but yeah, if you can do, it's good practice. But the more fresh fruits and vegetables you can add in, the better. And like you said, you can do it in such amazing ways. I mean, you don't need a lot of equipment. That's the other thing I love. You know, it's not like you have to have fancy equipment. You can have like a longevity soup, you know, it's like you need a big pot and a can opener and some scissors to open some frozen vegetables, right? So you can keep it really simple. I was going to say too, when you were talking about the salt, you know, I'm not hardcore on the SOS stuff. That's another, you know, version of the vegan plant-based whole food SOS. So yes, we don't do oil for purposes I already said, but the salt and the sugar, you know, I suggest, I tend to agree with Dr. McDougall that if to make the food palatable for you, if it takes putting a little salt on, you know, your food before you eat it, after you cooked it, like don't cook it with salt, but if you want to add a little, that's okay if you don't have high blood pressure, if you don't have some other medical issues, especially if you're an athlete and you're needing some salt. Same thing with sugar. If we make oatmeal, you know, we don't keep white sugar in the house, but you know, we'll put some maple syrup or date syrup. I even have brown sugar from time to time. So we don't eliminate those things. I know that some people have more addictive issues with some of those things. For me, it's peanut butter. I mean, I could eat a whole jar of peanut butter, so I have to be more careful with that than sugar.
Yeah. I can pound down the peanut butter too. But an important point for people to realize is that most of the salt that people get is actually from processed food.
Yes.
So if you're not eating processed food and you're not cooking with the salt, your salt intake is going to go way down. And like you say, if you don't have high blood pressure issues or whatever, maybe a little bit once in a while on the surface of the food is fine. Like as Dr. McDougall says, you want people to eat the food.
Right.
Maybe as time goes on, you'll eliminate that. I mean, we really don't have salt at all as your taste buds with that. But it's really more important to get that processed food out because it's the biggest source. And we do like, you know, put maybe a little bit of maple syrup on the oatmeal once in a while. You know, certainly a lot of sugar is not great. You know, I agree with that concept. But it's interesting. Well, we were just talking recently about Dr. Hempner. And I think it was at Duke University back in like the 40s and 50s or whatever. He was treating like horrible diabetics with obesity and, you know, blindness and kidney failure and all that. Amazingly, he was treating them with
white rice.
White rice.
Yes.
White rice, sugar, and fruit.
Right.
And that's what they've done. And they lost weight like crazy. Their kidney function normalized. Their diabetes went away. Some of them were actually going blind, got their vision back. And so, you know, I certainly, you know, table sugar is not the greatest on earth, but I don't know that it's the worst either.
Right.
It's, and in fact, you know, like hardcore athletes, like Tour de France riders, you know, going like 100 miles at a time or whatever, they will actually put table sugar in their water and drink it because they need those calories. I mean, that is you know, they need that energy. I mean, I'm not advocating that people consume as much sugar as they tend to in the United States, which is way too much, but a little bit here and there is probably not the end of the world.
Right. Well, and like you said, when you cut out the processed food, I mean, I read recently the #1 source of salt for people actually in the US is chicken. There's so much sodium added to chicken. Isn't that crazy? But, you know, like you said, you cut out soda, right? Things that people typically consume that are processed. And you, right there, if you get rid of processed food, you've basically gotten rid of your salt and your sugar issues, right? So yeah, it doesn't have to be that hard. And I would say even for long distance, I mean, my husband has Everested twice. I don't know if you know the Everesting thing, right? Like cycling. And he's done it all on whole food, plant-based foods, no oil foods. I mean, cooked up a bunch of potatoes, eaten a lot of bananas, dried fruit, you know, and hasn't had any issues. In fact, felt really good. So yeah, when we go on long distance rides of 50 to 60, 70 miles, we take whole food, plant-based foods. You know, there are a few bars we found that don't have added oil, or we cook up a bunch of potatoes and bring a little container of mustard and ketchup. I think sauces are a huge thing. Finding some sauces you like to top, whether it's making a really simple salad dressing, or like you said, the orange dressing flavor, what Japanese barbecue sauce, whatever it is, having a few different sauces to go over all these amazing vegetables that you're going to make really can make or break. When you're hungry, you're wanting something, plain salad's not going to cut it for very long, but you can have bowls of salad with an amazing tahini dressing, or a simple, we make the very simplest, and my son, it's his favorite still, equal parts maple syrup and mustard. Doesn't matter whatever kind of mustard you want. And it's so good. It tastes like a honey mustard dressing, but it used to be they loved ranch, so we'd make cashew ranch, but that tastes really rich to us now. So the honey mustard is our go-to.
Yeah, I do a fair bit of biking too. I don't know if I'm as hardcore as your husband, but I do bike either indoor or outdoors sort of year round. I've been doing that for about 3 years. Yeah. And I've been averaging about 40 miles a week over the course of the week. And, I've been wondering, am I capable of going 100 miles straight? And it was November in Minnesota, so I didn't do it outside for a program, which is probably at least as hard as going outside, because you never stop, you just keep going. And I went 102 miles. It was hard, but it wasn't as hard as I think it was going to be. And the reason I say that, and why I was able to do it, is totally the diet. And what I did is I just kept the carbs coming throughout the whole ride. And I did 102 miles. It took me about 6 hours and 20 minutes or something. I had no idea how long it was going to take. I didn't know it was going to take till midnight or whatever. It started about 7 in the morning, and I was done in a little over 6 hours. And I totally attribute that to the plant-based diet.
Yeah. Well, and your recovery was probably, really good too. People who deal with inflammation and aches and pains, Joyce, when you're saying when you change just how good you felt, when you did it in a short amount of time, those are some of the things that I think people really connect with, when you're a year in, or even a few weeks in, and people are like, wow, what are you doing? Your skin looks so good, and you're bursting with energy, and you don't have these aches and pains when you go to play basketball or go, run or do your regular bike ride. Like, those are some really amazing benefits that people experience.
As we wrap up, because I do want to be very sensitive to your time, I have this question I have to ask you. We live in this day and age where everybody has either tried the paleo diet, they're currently on the paleo diet. And man, if you have been on the paleo diet and you've lost weight, what are your thoughts about the whole paleo craze?
It kind of goes back. It reminds me of like the Atkins stuff, and then Atkins dies of heart issues kind of stuff. So we all know somebody, right, who did paleo or keto and has lost a bunch of weight. My thing is, check back in with that person, a year from now, 2 years, 3 years, right? So I think my main problem is with the whole thing is that those are diets. And I am not advocating a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet per se. I'm advocating a whole food, plant-based, no oil lifestyle. So that's another thing in the book. You have to not think about this as a diet, right? This is not something you're going to try for a short amount of time and then give up and go on to the next diet. This is a way of eating. This is a lifestyle that if you can adopt, and that's why I suggest if you try it really sincerely for 10 days, or if you are one of those people who, like I said, can't go black or white, but you slowly, you eat more fruits, vegetables, carbohydrates, greens, legumes, all that, and you slowly crowd out the meat and dairy. But this is for longevity. This is something you're going to want to do. And I think that it will speak for itself, the way your body feels, the way your blood work looks to your doctor, the way your health is going. All those things are such benefits. But it's helping people get out of this diet mentality. And we're all on that here, right? In the US, it's just people go from one diet to the next. And I think that's some of the best news, is letting people know that if you get this thing down, you will never have to do another diet in your life. You'll never have to look into buy another diet book or look into some program you have to buy meals from or what. You'll never have to do that again. And I just think, I mean, that's a huge benefit, right? And so many people waste so much money and time and energy and effort only to end up feeling horrible, to gain that weight back and then some, and then look for that magic bullet or pill or whatever down the road. So if people will give this a try and see the magic that plants can do all on their own, and understand that it's a long-term game, and it'll just get easier and better, then then I think that's the answer. But yeah, you know, initially those first views of people who are, you know, lost their 25 to 50 pounds on paleo or keto, that can be tough. But, you know, I mean, I have a close friend, and her doctor told her to do paleo, and she's struggling. You know, she lost a lot of weight. She gained a lot of weight back. She's trying it again, being so strict, but it's like, you can't maintain that. Your body lives off of carbohydrates. You know, it needs it. Your brain needs it, you know, your gut needs it. So yeah, it's just not a long-term solution. We're looking for long-term solutions.
Yeah. The thing is with the paleo diet, the way that most people practice it is they're using huge amounts of, you know, factory farm meat, which is way higher in fat than like wild caught game.
Right.
And the truth is that a Paleolithic man probably was only catching an animal once in a while, and it had to be shared amongst the whole village. The anthropologists that are sort of in the know say that, you know, a true Paleolithic diet is actually a very plant-centric diet, very, very high on plants. And so the way people practice a Paleolithic diet now is really nothing like a true Paleolithic diet, which is actually closer to how you and I eat, but without any meat at all.
Right.
But we're totally on the same page with you. The book is For Fork's Sake. It's an excellent book if you're starting out, and it's actually a really good, reinforces everything you know if you've been doing it for a while. So, Rachael, how would people get a hold of you if they want to get more information?
Yeah, my website is forforksakebook.com, and I've got some recipes on there, tips, information. You can sign up for a newsletter. I send something out once a week with some more information, some recipes, tips, that kind of stuff. I'm on social media, Instagram for Fork's Sake Book, and Facebook also for Fork's Sake Book, LinkedIn at Rachael Brown. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, here's for staying happy and plant powered, yay.
Oh yeah.
And I'm happy with this stuff, but that's all we've been talking about. We'd love to have you again. I mean, seriously, I have more questions, but this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And to that point, yes, when we were talking about the different titles, right? It's hard to say no, you know, whole food, plant-based, no oil. It's kind of a mouthful. So that was my attempt, going from SAD, the standard American diet, to happy, healthy, and plant-powered, yay.
Love it.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Been great.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.